Welcome everyone to another episode of Small Business Treasury. And today I want to talk about the importance of proper bookkeeping using QuickBooks. So recently I was engaged to do a cleanup project for one of my clients. And one of the issues I encountered is something that many small businesses encounter during their cleanup process or their bookkeeping process, or someone who's not really experienced in bookkeeping. They typically tend to ignore this. And after doing a lot of research, I discovered that many business owners and small business owners encounter this very similar situation whenever they're doing their bookkeeping. And the big situation that I encountered when I was doing this cleanup for my client was she has a cleaning company. And what you will discover is that in cleaning companies, just like any other business, whether it's construction, real estate, or design or web services, you'll discover that you'll have a lot of bank deposits that occur via cash through ATM deposits, via Zelle payments, or other types of payments like credit card transactions. In the situation that occurs whenever you're doing this type of bookkeeping or deposit into the bank and you're reconciling with your QuickBooks account is that many times if you have an open invoice and you have an ongoing bank deposit and those two transactions are not matched, you'll end up discovering that QuickBooks is double recording those deposits into their QuickBooks transactions. So I wish I could show my screen and explain what that looks like, but I can't because of confidential information, obviously. But I'll try to explain it to the best of my abilities in this session. So whenever you're recording transactions in QuickBooks and you're recording specifically deposits or transactions that are payments from your customers, from your clients, you'll have a different form of recording that most people do. Most of them they'll have an invoice, and then they'll have the other format, which is bank deposits. But what most people don't understand is that those two have to go together. And if they don't go together, they're going to create a big mess in your QuickBooks. So let's go ahead and give the example of which I encountered with my client was during the situation when I was doing the cleanup, I discovered that they had a lot of invoices from the previous year. And in their invoices, they recorded those transactions as being as paid, paid from the client. And it could be from a variety of different reasons. It could be that you remember that the client paid you for this specific job, or maybe you sent it out to the client via QuickBooks email and they made the payment and it marks it as paid, and you don't think much about it. However, the problem exists whenever the bank transactions come through and all of those deposits are coming through and they're not being matched to that QuickBooks invoice. And what ends up happening is using QuickBooks software, what it does is it automatically recognizes every single time an invoice is paid, whether that's marked by you personally or that's marked via the email when the client submits or the customer submits a paid invoice. And what ends up happening is as soon as that invoice is marked as paid, if you do not attach the bank deposit to that invoice, you're going to get what is called double entry recording of deposits. And that is a big issue because you'll end up noticing that you are actually, QuickBooks is recording more revenue than what's actually coming in. And I discovered that with my client over the series of past few weeks when I was doing a cleanup for her. And I was engaged to do a 2025 cleanup project. And when I was going through the list of transactions, the expenses, it wasn't a big deal. But when I came across the deposits, I noticed that every single bank transaction did not match a paid invoice. Or, in other words, there was, or another situation, it was there wasn't an invoice that was created for a deposit. And what ends up happening is if a bank deposit is not matched to an invoice, then your QuickBooks will recognize it two separate revenue streams, which would be the paid invoice and record the bank deposit. And that is incredibly important to recognize that whenever you have bank deposits or bank transactions or bank credits and they're not matched up to an open invoice or a paid invoice, you're going to basically double your revenue in something that's going to completely mess up your books. So, in order to fix this, it's very important that every time you have a bank deposit comes in, that you or your QuickBooks advisor or your or your bookkeeper, they go in and they match that deposit to a paid invoice or an open invoice. That way, there's not double entry or double revenue being counted whenever you are recording your books. As long as the paid invoice or open invoice is matched to or attached or matched to a bank deposit, your your revenue is not going to be double counted. Okay, and that's very important whenever you're doing your ongoing bookkeeping. Whether that's you as the business owner doing it or whether that's your bookkeeper doing it, you have to make sure that they should be educated enough to understand that principle. But if they're not, you should be educating your bookkeeper the importance of matching all bank deposits to ongoing open invoices or paid invoices that exist already at the platform. Because if you don't, you'll quickly realize that all of your revenue streams is being double counted, and when it comes to tax season, that's going to create a big headache for your CPA. Okay, remember that most CPAs are not your bookkeepers, so many times they rely heavily on your information that you provide to them to make sure that they are going to complete their compliance on filing your taxes for your organization, for your company. So that being said, let's go back and do some best practices whenever you're doing bookkeeping, whether it's you as a business owner or you have your bookkeeper doing it on your behalf. You want to make sure that bookkeeping is being done on a very frequent basis, whether that's daily or weekly, and at most bi-weekly, because depending on how many transactions come in on a weekly basis, it's going to be very difficult for you to remember what the bank deposits are associated to which open invoices or paid invoices. Okay, expenses is not very difficult. You can push that out for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, even sometimes a month. It's not a big deal. So the deposits are very, very important, especially if they're cash deposits or deposits that don't have any information associated to an open invoice. Now, if your deposits have that your clients or your customers include the invoice in which they paid, that's very helpful. But as we all know, whenever customers are making payments, or they're making Zelle payments, or they're making transfers, they're not always going to include that information on their specific transfer um, information when they're issuing their payment. So it's up to you to make sure that when you're receiving those payments, that you or your bookkeeper are recognizing which of those payments or bank deposits is associated to which invoice. Because the more time that goes on, the more blurry the memory becomes, and you don't remember which of those invoices were actually paid. Because remember that if you sent an email to your clients or your customers to make a payment via QuickBooks or via email, as soon as they mark it as paid, QuickBooks recognize it as paid. But if the bank deposit comes through and you don't attach it or match it to that invoice, you're going to have double revenues being recorded. And there's no way around it, because I ended up calling QuickBooks customer service and I asked them, hey, I'm doing a cleanup project for one of my clients. This is the situation. Is there anything that we can do to clean up this entire mess? Because obviously we have more bank deposits than we have existing open invoices or paid invoices. And unfortunately, she told me, we walked through it together. We used a virtual connect to share our screens, and she told me that there's no way around it. That every time you have a bank deposit, you must attach it to an invoice, or else QuickBooks will double record that type of revenue. It will record it once as a bank deposit, and it will record the other one as a paid invoice. So for every paid invoice, you should have an attached bank deposit. And for every bank deposit, it should be associated to an invoice. And if there's not an invoice associated to that bank deposit, you need to create one. And that's how you keep your books clean. And that's how you make sure that when you're running your profit and loss statements on QuickBooks, that all of that information is being recorded properly. Okay. So that's the importance of making sure that you are following proper good habits and proper procedures whenever you're doing your QuickBooks, whether it's you're doing it yourself as a business owner, whether you have a fractional CFO doing it, whether you have a bookkeeper doing it for you. The importance of making sure that every single bank deposit has an invoice attached to it is going to make all of your books and your statements and your transactions be very, very clean. So at the end of the year, when it is tax season, you can simply print out the profit and loss statement and submit it to your CPA. Now, there's going to be days where the if the CPA is going to request additional information, and if your QuickBooks is unorganized, it's going to be very difficult to answer those questions. But if everything is up to date, everything is reported properly, every single transaction, whether it's an expense or whether it's a deposit, is booked properly within your QuickBooks software. All you have to do is run different reports and hand it into the CPA for the specific item that she's referring to. Okay. So to reiterate, it's very important that every bank deposit has an associated invoice. And if there's not an invoice associated to that deposit, you need to create one. And every invoice that is issued that is marked as paid, whether it's manually or it's marked as paid when the client pays through QuickBooks email, that you go and you make sure that you attach that bank deposit to that invoice. That's going to keep everything clean. That's how you record all of your bank deposits to your invoices so it doesn't record a double source of revenue. Okay. And I'll give you additional help and additional information that if you are not up to date on that, and you think that QuickBooks is going to help you, or QuickBooks support is going to help you, they are unlikely to help you because I made the same phone call to them requesting information if there was a way around it, and unfortunately there is not. So it's very important that you as the business owner are marking your invoices and your deposits matched together. Your expenses is not very difficult. You can let those accumulate over time. There's going to be a certain pattern. There's things that are certain office supplies, subscriptions, cost of goods. All of those things are very simple. You can clean that up fairly easily. But deposits it's a different story. If you are not up to date daily or weekly, and you are not frequent in matching those invoices to those deposits, come the end of the year, come the end of the month, come the end of the quarter, it's going to be very difficult for you to remember what those bank deposits were for and what invoice it was associated to. And it's going to completely mess up your books. Your profit and loss is going to be completely disorganized, is going to be completely off, and it's going to be a huge mess to clean up. And even professional bookkeepers, they're going to encounter the issue that I encountered, which was if there's limited information on the deposits, especially if it's cash deposits, and there's not invoices that are open or marked as paid, or any type of information that gives the bookkeeper the ability to match that deposit to an invoice, is going to be almost impossible to reconcile those deposits at the end of the year or in a cleanup project. And it's going to be much more expensive for you as the business owner, and it's going to be much more complicated for the bookkeeper. So good habits are to keep good, clean books, mark those deposits weekly, daily if possible. Don't let it pass more than 2 weeks, and you continue to keep your books clean. Your expenses, you can make sure you can record those every other week if you want to. Preferably, you should do it every week, or even better, you should be doing it daily. But I know that many business owners, it's very difficult to encounter, to be able to do that on a frequent basis. And you have to do that every other week or weekly, whatever the situation may be. But the importance of making sure that you are frequent in your processes and making sure you're checking your books often, you're recording your books often, you're doing it as quickly as possible to make sure that you are not forgetting any of the deposits that come through, is going to make your QuickBook experience and your profit and loss statements as accurate as possible. So remember, it's also going to be very important for your CPA, because your CPA relies heavily on your profit and loss or the information that you provide to them. And if your CPA is receiving monthly bank statements from you as the business owner, they are going to cross-check the deposits in the bank statement to the deposits that's in QuickBooks. And many times that's the give and tell of a complete variance or discrepancy between what's recorded in QuickBooks and what actually hit the bank. Okay, so if your CPA is receiving monthly bank statements from you because you provide it to them because you need to make monthly or quarterly tax payments, at the end of the year, they're going to cross-check all of the deposits that are related to client or customer payments and compare that to your profit and loss statement on your sales revenue from your QuickBooks. And if they're completely off, they are going to ask you to clean up the QuickBooks profit and loss statement. And if many months have gone by and you don't remember what what invoices were associated to certain deposits, is going to make the cleanup process very, very difficult, and is going to be much more expensive for you if you decide to hire a bookkeeper to do a cleanup project for you. Anyways, that's all for today's video. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments or send me a message directly.